Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our continuing series, our webinars with Alberta Prosperity Projects. Tonight we have a very special guest on our show. His name is Ken Drysdale. And Ken has been the consummate engineer, you might say. And I'm just going to read a little bit about his background. Ken is married to children and 4 grandchildren. That's pretty impressive. Ken is an executive engineer with over 41 years of experience as a professional engineer, including the development and management of national and regional engineering businesses. Ken is currently retired from full practice as a consulting engineer, but continues to be active in the area of forensic engineering, investigations, preparation of expert reports, and expert testimony at trial, arbitrations, and mediations. On numerous occasions, he has testified as an expert witness on trials in Manitoba and Ontario, and he has acted as the arbitrator and mediator in disputes. During the height of the COVID lockdown, Ken felt that the information he was receiving from the media, government, and healthcare sources were inconsistent, and that information that was being widely distributed did not appear to fit or his own observations and those of many people in his community. With the encouragement of many of the people around him, he set out to carry out a forensic analyst of the actual data that was being supplied by the Government of Canada through Statistics Canada, Health Canada, and through the provincial government sources. Ken has had no preconceived notions as to what he would find in the data, and that's what he did find. And what he did find rather shocked him. Based on his findings, Ken prepared an 89-page report which reviews the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and the actual mortality numbers as reported by the Government of Canada. Ken prepared this report as a private citizen and not part of his capacity as a professional engineer. The report is entitled Investigation into Criminal Allegations Concerning COVID-19 Pandemic Response. The report, as well as other resources, have been made available for free and for anonymous download from his website at www.thetruthfactscovid19.com, and COVID is a C. So I'll repeat that again, www.thetruthfactsc19.com. The website was created in June 2022, and since that time has received approximately 178,000 visits from people all over the world. It is estimated that the report has been downloaded, copied, shared, and forwarded to government and police representations approximately 500,000 times. In addition to the report, he has produced a series of 14 webcast videos hosted by Rosalie Drysdale, Chris Riddell, and himself that take the viewer step by step through the report. The webcasts are available on his website, and I encourage you to go to his website and take a look. And they are also available on Rumble and BitChute. So please welcome Ken. And Ken, I welcome you. I'm thoroughly excited about having you come on our site tonight, and I'm sure you're going to enlighten a lot of us. And I know in our previous discussion that I learned a few things which I won't say shocked me, but somewhat surprised me. So take it away.
Well, you know, it shocked me. I went into this thing really not knowing what I was going to find. And when I came out the other side, I don't want to say I was jaded, but I was shocked. And the intent of the original report was just to review those numbers. But anyone who starts reading it will discover that the first few chapters have to do with us making a presentation to the RCMP or to the regional police forces, because the information that we discovered was so appeared to be so fraudulent that we believed that it resulted in criminal allegations. So again, we're not saying anybody's guilty. What we're saying is that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And certainly we've taken a preliminary look at it, but we did present it to all the RCMP, every single station, RCMP and regional police in Manitoba, and it's gone out to just about every police force across the country. It's gone to every level of government in every province, federal government, every senator, every MP, every member of the legislature in Canada has gotten copies of this. Amazingly, when we went to visit with the RCMP here in Winnipeg on September 3rd, they were saying, well, we don't know anything about this. And we know that they got it hundreds of times. So it's been an interesting journey. I have to say for my own self that I can't overemphasize how shocking the information was. It was almost like discovering when you were a child that something you always believed in didn't exist. And I won't say any more than that, not knowing who's online. Might be some kiddies there. But
Ken, I have to ask you, sorry, I have to ask you, is there one incident that you heard about or read or listened to that actually got you going on this pathway? Because I know that I had a couple of things happen to me, and as soon as I was listening or watching, I thought there's something not right here, and I thought, I'm going to start looking into this, and that's what got me going and kept me interested in this whole COVID-19 thing, going into great detail for quite a period of time. And I'm just wondering, what it was that got you going.
Well, almost 2 years ago, one of my sons came to phone to me, and he was upset, and he was saying how our whole medical system here in Manitoba was collapsing because of the number of COVID-19 patients that were in hospital. And that didn't sound quite right to me. So I started looking at those numbers. And at the time, I think there was 35 people that the government said were in hospital, not because of COVID-19, but with COVID-19. And in a province of 1.2 or 1.3 million people, I said to my son, you're meaning to tell me that the system will collapse when we only have 35 people in hospital with this, or supposedly not necessarily because of it? And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you were in the hospital for any reason, if you were in the ICU for any reason, a car accident, maybe you fell down and broke your leg, if they tested you for COVID and the test came out positive, they counted you as a COVID-19 case, whether you were in there because of COVID or just with COVID. So this was back 2 years ago, and I kind of did a little preliminary study, and a copy of that is in the appendices to the current study. But then I didn't do much until the fall of 2021, when we were in the height of lockdowns here in Manitoba. Families were tearing themselves apart. We were members of various community groups for 20 years, and we were told we couldn't come into the facilities any longer because we weren't. We had elected not to take the genetic experimental therapy. And so what we decided to do in the midst of it all, we decided we're going to start our own social group. And two couples got together and talked about this one night. And before you knew it, we were meeting with 35 to 40 people. And after the first meeting, which was just a dinner club, it was just a catered dinner that was in the fall. For Christmas, we had another one, and 4 or 5 people, and I wasn't part of it, got together and started talking about, we got to do something. And interestingly enough, my wife was a part of that group, and she quickly realized that I was going to say that they wanted me as part of it, but no, my wife wanted me to be part of it. So when you ask me what brought me to it, a lot of people talk about hearing the still small voice. Well, my still small voice is a 5'4" brunette, and she kind of brought me into it. And very quickly, it was a group of people, business people, small business owners, but they had never, done anything like this before. And, I had written dozens, if not hundreds, of expert reports for trial, mediations, litigations, all kinds of things. And I realized very quickly that when they were talking about putting together a report that relied on doctors' opinions or experts, whatever that means, I knew that wouldn't go anywhere. So what my suggestion to the group is, we got to pull together a report that the government can't dispute. And how would you do that? You would use their very own words. So when I started examining the pandemic response in the report, in the 89-page report, what you'll see is the numbers as presented by the government. In other words, when I look at mortality numbers and I say the government's reported 2 deaths from COVID, I never disputed that. I never disputed were those deaths because of COVID, with COVID, was the testing proper? Never questioned it. Just used their words exactly the way they presented them. And so that's the first part of it. That's the first thing I did as I looked at the statistics. And right away, I started to wonder what the heck was going on. Because when I looked at, for instance, I looked at mortality rates in Canadian citizens over the age of 70 years old, and I compared the mortality rates in 2019 to the mortality rates in 2020. And what I found is if you were over the age of 70 in Canada in 2019, your chance of dying were 1 in 32 for whatever the cause was. In 2020, when they started to lock us down and they were starting to spend billions of dollars on this, and they told us that COVID, if you got COVID and you were over the age of 70, it was a death sentence. Your odds in 2020 of dying from COVID, if you were again over the age of 70, were 1 in 324. So your odds of just dying were 10 times higher than your odds of contracting and dying of COVID. So I said, what? Like, this isn't what they were saying. So then the next group. So then I started looking at other groups, and I looked at children 19 years of age and younger, and those numbers were just insane. And I've got the report here. I'm going to refer to it. In 2019, if you were 19 years of age and younger in Canada, you had a odds of 1 in about 1,400 of dying from whatever cause. Your odds of dying of COVID, according to the government's own statistics, were 1 in 4 million. So your odds of catching COVID and dying of it were 1 in 4 million. Your chance of dying for whatever other natural cause in 2019 or whatever cause was about 1 in, well, it's actually 1 in 1,365. Now, when I saw that, I went a little bit further. I wanted to know what the odds were of a child in that age group. According to the government of Canada, what were the odds of a child having a severe reaction to the vaccine? And then once again, according to the government's own numbers, the chance of you having a reaction to the vaccine were just about 16,000 times higher than your chance of contracting COVID and dying of it if you were 19 years of age and younger. That's 16,000 times. So then I thought, well, yeah. And then I started looking at the information that was provided to the government by the manufacturers, in other words, what they knew about the risks to children. And that shocked me as well, because I found out they really didn't know anything. They hadn't done any testing on children. They knew that there was possibility for acute allergic reactions. They knew there was a risk of myocarditis and pericarditis. And I challenge all of our listeners, how many of you heard knew what those terms meant 2 years ago? They had no idea what effect the vaccines had on fertility in children. There was no carcinogenic studies. There was no immune system studies. In other words, there was no studies on children. And, Sean, probably you and I are old enough to remember the whole thalidomide thing.
But it appears, I remember that.
It appears 50 or 60 years later, they never learned their lessons. And for those of you who don't know what that was a drug that was given to women who were pregnant and causing tremendous numbers of birth defects. So
we had that in 1976 too with the swine flu. That's something that people forget about. Our memories tend to be rather short, and even the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. That was another thing that was somewhat led by Anthony Fauci, and that was a complete disaster. So here we are again. We've got another one.
Well, you're exactly right. And when we looked at the children, and then that occurred to me, and I knew somebody, a couple, who was pregnant at the time, and every time the wife went in to see her doctor, the doctor was screaming at her to take the shot, and the husband didn't want her to take the shot. So there was huge fights going on there for 9 months, and once the baby was born, she went out and got the shot. But so I thought, let's look at what was going on with pregnant women. So we once again we analyzed the statistics, and I shouldn't use that word, because as soon as I say the word statistics, that's like a swear word. People's eyes roll back in their heads, and they don't even want to hear anymore. But so I'm only going to say arithmetic, because none of this is fancy stuff. It's just arithmetic. There was 8 million people under the age of 19, and the government said 2 died of COVID. That's how simple the arithmetic is. You divide one by the other. So there's no magic statistics here. People need to check it out for themselves. But I'm just turning now in the report to the section on pregnant women. So we analyzed, what was the odds of somebody, a woman in Canada in childbearing ages, of just dying, just like we said before in 2019, and then dying of COVID. And then we also looked at dying of other causes. And, in 2020, your odds of dying, if you were a woman between the ages of 20 and 39 years old, was about 1 in 1,700, almost 1,800. Your odds of contracting and dying of COVID, 1 in 250,000.
It's amazing.
You know what your odds of dying from just being pregnant were? 1 in 15,000. So you had a much higher chance of just dying from being pregnant than you did of COVID. COVID was 1 in 250,000. Dying from being pregnant was 1 in 15,635. Your odds of dying of a heart, just talking about real numbers, the government of Canada reported that 20 women in that age group contracted and died of COVID-19. 24 died in pregnancy, 416 died of cancer, 114 heart, 29 influenza, 20 COVID. How about this one? 341 suicides. Sean, can you imagine how many lives that could have been saved if we would have spent those billions of dollars in trying to prevent those 341 suicides, as opposed to the 20 reported deaths by COVID?
I know, it's quite depressing. The lockdowns and everything created so many other problems, and of course suicides were one of them, and that was really unfortunate. And I don't think you ever heard any government official ever apologize to any of the families that lost loved ones to suicide because of the lockdowns. That just never happened.
Well, the interesting thing is the data that I've been talking to you about is data as a base, as a constant. We looked at 2019 before COVID, and then we looked at 2020, and I've been questioned, well, why aren't you looking at 2021? And the answer is, Government of Canada hasn't released 2021 information yet. I think it's January of 2023 now, isn't it?
Yeah, and who knows when they're going to release that? They're probably going to be dragging their rear ends on that one. I just can't see them releasing it anytime soon.
Well, I did a blog post, and the title of the blog post, and it had to do with the subject, and the blog post title was, "How long does it take to bake a cake?" And so we looked at statistics, or sorry, I use the S word. Sorry, everybody, arithmetic. And we saw immediately how insane this was. There was no pandemic. There was no pandemic. I repeat that. Look at the numbers. Look up the numbers yourself, and I give you links to the Government of Canada website. So then we kind of, before we left that subject, we kind of looked at births that occurred in Canada. And I don't know about in Alberta, but I suspect Alberta is very similar to Manitoba. In the wintertime, if you get a storm and you're inside for a day or two, 9 months later, there's a bump in births. Well, amazingly, when people were locked up for whatever number of months it was in Canada, the birth rate went down by about 11 to 12,000 from 2019 compared to 2020. How did that happen? I don't know what the answer to that is, But why is no one asking? Where are there no
I don't know either.
investigations?
That's an interesting statistic.
So before we move on to that, I just wanted to point out to folks that we have all that written out, and we have all in the document, and we have links and stuff to the raw data for you. But we also created these infographic pages for you. So we're making this as easy as we possibly can. So that whole bit that we just talked about, there's infographics pages that give you all that information all in one convenient source, easy to understand source. So then the next thing that we did, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Ken, can you say where that's available again? Is that available on your True Facts website?
Yeah, you'll see at the bottom of my screen, but next to my name, the www.thetruefactc19.com. And by the way, for everyone, that website is absolutely free. We're not selling you anything. We're not selling you t-shirts. We're not selling you subscriptions. And you can go on there anonymously. You don't have to sign for anything. And you can download the reports right on the front page. And if I can switch over to my screen. I'm going to try this super duper thing, and because I've got a screenshot on my secondary screen right now. Share screen. Screen share. There we go. Share. So can you see the? Oh, there it is. So you can see this is the True Facts C19 website, and right on the very front.
It's not showing up on my screen.
Oh, there it is.
Maybe it's coming up now. Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the True Facts C19 website, and you can see very simple. At the top, there's home, news, webcast, RCMP gathering, and I'll talk about each one of those. But right here in the very first part, this is a cover of the investigation, and all these yellow buttons you can push. It'll download the report as a PDF. You can download the appendices. You can download the cover letter that went to the police. You can download these really cool business cards that we did. You can download those and print those and hand those out. And what that is a QR code on the back. And if you scan it, it downloads the report.
Wow, that's a great resource.
Well, you know, the funniest story I heard about these was my wife was coming home from Edmonton, and she was in Saskatchewan, and my wife has a tendency to think her car is a meteor, and she's driving like, fairly quickly, and the RCMP pulled her over. And, the normal thing goes back and forth between them, and he gives her a ticket, and just as the police officer is turning to go away, my wife says, "Oh, just a second, I have something for you." She reaches into her purse and hands him one of these. And he was very polite, and he took the card. I don't know if he read it or not, but in any case, on our website, you can see there's a promotional video you can watch. There's this button right here that I'm pointing at right now. If you click on that, it will download just the infographic pages that I talked about a little bit earlier. And then there's actually a bit of a interesting analysis we did here. It's called, I did this analysis when the government started moving against hunters, gun owners. And I was curious to wonder how many firearm related murders or homicides there were in Canada. And I wondered how the trend was in those, because if you're like me and you see in the news they keep saying that the rate is going mad and it's just there's more and more and more and more homicides with guns in Canada, that's a lie. The number of gun homicides in Canada has numerically been going up, but that's because the population has been going up by 750,000 people a year. And these numbers are in the report, by the way. But the actual rate, the number of homicides per 100,000 Canadians or per million Canadians has been exactly the same for over 20 years. It has not changed one bit. Now, so the other interesting thing was I wanted to look at those numbers again, and I'm going by my memory here, but there were in 2019 there were like 285 homicides with firearms in Canada. That includes pistols, shotguns, long rifles, that kind of thing. Of that amount, 43% were professional hits or gang-related murders. So that left you with a little less, or a little more than half that were, normal, what you would call is maybe they're homicides of passion. But then what I did was I went to Health Canada and I said, how many deaths by COVID vaccine were Health Canada reporting in the same time period? And you know what? There were more deaths by vaccine reported by Health Canada than there were overall homicides in Canada with firearms. I think the number that Health Canada reported as deaths were 380 or 320 or whatever the number is, but folks can download that and see. And again, the number of homicides was around 285, including gang-related professional hits. So it almost seems that no matter where I looked, no matter what rock I lifted up, there was rot and lies under it. I'll just go back for a bit to the website. Folks you can see on there, we give you what do you want to do, and we give you the addresses for members of the House of Commons and the Senate. We've got a wide variety of videos on here, different interviews that I've done. And then across the top, there's our news feed, which is a blog feed. You can sign up to that. There's no cost. And you can see there's a variety of different things there. There's a webcast page, which let's just see. There we go. There's a webcast. We actually did a series of webcasts. They're like 20 to 35 minutes long each. There's we've released 11 of them. I think there's 13 or 14. And each one covers a different section of the investigative report. And you can actually follow along with the hosts, and they go through the report. And the first 4 episodes were hosted by Mr. Chris Riddell, and who's a retired police officer, and Rosalie Drysdale. And you can see them there. And then the next 4 after that were myself and Rosalie. And then the last bunch of them were done by 3 of us, Chris Riddell, Rosalie Drysdale, and Ken Drysdale. So again, I understand some people are a little intimidated at reading an 89-page report. You can download your report and you can start watching these videos, and you just follow right along. And you can see on each one, you can click on the picture and it plays right in our website, or you can watch it on Rumble, or you can watch it on BitChute. The reason YouTube's not there is because we started posting to YouTube, and when we got to the 4th one, they gave me a warning and told me bad things, so I just cut them out. We don't go to YouTube anymore.
No, I've watched some of the videos and they're quite good, and it also shows that you've been a very, very busy man, along with your wife, Rosalie. Yeah, you've really made this one of your passions, that's for sure.
Well, again, the still small voice gets louder if I don't do that. There's the last button on that website, by the way, it says RCMP gathering, and you could read this yourselves. But what we did was we created a model for taking the report in groups of people to the RCMP, and we staged a gathering in Winnipeg. There was about 1,000 people there, and about 300 of them showed up with copies of the report. RCMP locked the doors to the headquarters, and a line of about 300 praying people lined up in front of the headquarter doors, and they each laid down a copy of the report. It was incredible. There's video on our news or our blogcast. You see 300 people lined up pretty much in silence, and each one laying a report down at the doors. There were people praying, there were people crying, there were every walk of every occupation, every group in Canada were there. It was incredible. I mean, I don't know how the RCMP kept the doors closed and their video cameras in the windows watching us. But anyway, on this page, it gives you all the information you need, posters, letters that we wrote, everything that we did to have a safe and peaceful and respectful gathering. And again, everything on our website is open source. In other words, you can take it and you can use it, you can copy it, you can send it out. It's free of charge.
So did you have the media actually cover your that not incident, that event at the RCMP headquarters? Did they cover that at all?
No, all the alternative media was there. Not a single mainstream media were there. And CBC's headquarters were 2 blocks or 3 blocks down the road.
What a surprise.
Yeah, yeah. But you
Yeah,
know, we had great citizen participation. The city of Winnipeg police cooperated, and they provided security. The RCMP were invited and provided a speaker position right after my speech, and the whole crowd of 1,000 people waited for the RCMP representative to come out, and of course they didn't. We had retired police officers there to provide security for the RCMP should they decide to come out. But you know, that's the attitude of our national police force. And there's
yeah,
a
go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I was just going to say there's a blog post, a follow-up blog post coming out in the next few days where we actually have communications directly from the commissioner in Manitoba for the RCMP and what they said about the rally. It's going to be an interesting post comes out. It'll be the next day or two on our website.
Well, I have to relay an incident to you. We used to have these rallies in Calgary, the Freedom Convoy rallies. And some of the rallies, we had 15,000 people walk down the streets in the city of Calgary, all very peacefully, not making any noise or anything like that. And guess what? There wasn't one bit of coverage on the mainstream media,
Of course
not once.
Of course
And
not.
not until there was a group of about a dozen protesters protesting the Freedom Walk. And that's when it became big news. But the many weeks before, there were all these rallies with thousands of people, not one bit of coverage anywhere. It was, yeah, we're living in this mediated reality where the media controls everything. And of course, consequently, people believe they're in the media and they, of course, people believe what they want to believe. And, with those two things, the coverage is just very poor. It's really sad.
Well, it's like everything, and I was speaking about this a little earlier, and that is the government has taken over through money just about every institution. People are aware that the mainstream media were given billions and billions of dollars for support, and I understand one of them had their hands out again a month or two ago for more money from the federal government. Of course, once the federal government gives you money, you're not free anymore. But what people don't understand is it's everywhere. It's in the professional associations, because those are all supposed to be independently funded by the professions themselves. About 20, 25 years ago, the provinces started to fund them. So then they took them over. The schools, everybody knows about the schools, but the profession, the pharmacy association, the medical association, all of those things have been taken over by the government. So when the government says, you're going to do this, guess what? They do it. And it's in places you wouldn't even imagine, it's an incredible, but before we go back to the report, there's a lot of hope here. I know I get emails from across the country every day. I don't know how many emails I get, lots and lots and lots. And people say to me, well, what the heck can I do? What can not Ken Drysdale, but what can I do? And I'm going to just show on the screen, I'm going to switch the screen, this map. I did this map today from the server from the truefactc19.com. Now, we've been online since June of 2022, so a little more than 6 months. All those blue dots, that's where people have come from who've gone to our website and or downloaded our report. There is only
impressive.
there's only one continent on Earth where it's not showing up there, and that's Antarctica. But you can see North America, you can see all the way down in South America, Africa, out here in the French Polynesia, Japan, China, Russia, Ukraine, all through Europe. This is what one person in their basement on their computer getting instructions from their wife can achieve. So if you don't think you could do something, folks, I've made it real easy for you. Download the report, send it to somebody. Send it to your senator. You don't know what your senator's email address is? On my website, there's a thing, and you can get your senator's address. You can get your MP's address. Drop it off at the school, at the principal's office. Give it to your minister. Put it in the mailbox next door to you. But do something.
Yeah, that's the only way we can do it is to, you know, educate and enlighten people and make sure that they see all the facts, because otherwise this is, just going to go the way of the dodo bird, and they're not going to do anything about it. And we definitely need to do something about it.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of new groups. There's lots and lots of groups you can join across the country, but
Mm.
ours is a little bit unique. You can hide under the bed. You could go on anonymously. You could download those business cards. You could print them at home. You can pin them up on the bulletin board in the mall. You could be like my wife. I don't know if I'd have the courage to do this, but you're getting a ticket and you hand the cop one of these cards. I mean, you don't have to be a superhero. If you send one of these out a week, it's going to make a difference. Like I said, it's been copied, sent out 500,000 times. And again, there's no cost. I will never charge you anything. You get an email from me asking for money, it's fake. It's not from me. Any case, but if we get back to the report, so we looked at the numbers. Then we started thinking about, well, did the government not do any planning for a pandemic? I mean, we had the swine flu, we had a number of different things. And indeed, we found out that they had actually done the Canadian Influenza Pandemic Plan. And guess who wrote it? Teressa Tam, along with just about every doctor that was in the government service at the time. Hundreds of them. I think there's 14 pages of credits on that 616-page report from the government.
And how many years ago was that?
2006. 2006, and wow. It was updated a number of times. It was from a seed from the WHO. But in our report, starting at about page 52, we actually show you quotes. I can take this thing off the screen. I'll stop screen sharing. Let's see if I can get my mouse to work. Probably because, you did it for me. Thank you. But you can see in the report, you'll find boxes like this. And what that box is, it's a screen capture from the Canadian Influenza Pandemic Plan. And just about in every single case, the recommendations that they made in the Canadian Influenza Pandemic Plan, they went opposite of during the COVID thing. And it's interesting, they'll tell you, well, that's because it was different. Our assumptions were wrong. No, they weren't. In that 616-page document, they go through what the characteristics of the pandemic were that they were planning for. And it's spot on to what we've got here. So, when they talk about masks, they talk about lockdowns, they talk about all kinds of things in here. And like I said, in every single instance, they did the opposite. And again, the report goes through that in detail. Now, the next section of the report, and I think this one, people have asked me, what was the thing that shocked me the most? And I have to say, well, the totality of the fraud was what shocked me the most. But the thing that got me the angriest, is on page 60. And what that is right there is a Health Canada statement that they issued December 9th to the people of Canada. And they said that, they were thanking global advances in technology, and they were going to, and they had applied strictest safety standards to evaluate the vaccines. What this announcement was, it was announcing the new vaccines. They said that it had rigorous testing. They said that they had strong monitoring systems in place. And when I read that, I thought, well, what did they really have? Well, as we talked about earlier, they never did testing on children. They never did testing on pregnant women. They never did they did no independent third-party reviewed testing. The rigorous monitoring system that they had in place was a voluntary system. Most people in Canada don't even know what it is. And I usually make a little thing of this. Who can tell me what the name of the Canadian vaccine monitoring system was? most people can't. They talk about VAERS, which is the American one. They talk about CARES, which is a private citizen voluntary one in Canada. But so they had, just to put this in perspective, okay, so let's say we had a voluntary reporting system for, I don't know, speeding. How about homicide? How many people would report? How many people would you think get speeding tickets if it was a voluntary reporting system? How many people do you know who had a reaction, didn't go to the hospital? How many people do you know, and I know many, who had severe reactions, went to the hospital by ambulance, some of them, and they never got it, the doctors never reported it. No. It's got nothing to do. But I just had the vaccine this morning. I've never had this happen to me. Oh, no, it's got nothing to do with it. So the government was playing with your lives. I don't know how to explain this better. They said that they had done rigorous testing and there almost none was done. They said they had strong monitoring systems in place for this mRNA technology that had never, ever been before used on humans. And they had a voluntary system. And they didn't test it on a lot of the population. This is the thing that got me angriest. I laugh a little bit now, but you'll see it's a nervous laugh because I'm still, when I read this, I just get angrier and angrier.
Yeah, it's quite depressing when you look at the chain of events and how they happened and how it was implemented and carried through, and the whole works is just it was terrible.
Well, you know, shortly after the vaccines were approved for emergency use, the FDA required that Pfizer do an analysis of the voluntarily reported data on side effects, and that was in February of 2021. And we show you that result, that study right here. That's taken right from the government's own documentation. And it's interesting, you know, I've said many times, I was a bit of a science, it won't be a surprise to anybody, I was a bit of a science geek in high school. But if I would have brought in a study paper like what Pfizer did to the government, my teacher would have thrown me out of class and failed me. And what am I talking about? So according to Pfizer, in February of 2021, they studied 42,086 cases of reactions to the vaccine. 42,000. Of that, they said around 29,000 were female, 9,000 were male, and they had no data on almost 3,000 of them. They didn't know if they were male, female, or whatever. And then with regard to the ages, the ages of 6,876 out of 42,000 unknown. And then as far as the case outcomes were concerned, recovered or recovering was a line item here, 19,582. Don't know how many of those were actually recovered and how many of them are recovering still. But if they were still recovering, you don't know what the outcome was. Because unless you're recovered, and then the next line was recovered with, and I'm sorry for all those medical people that are listening, and I'll get this wrong, I'm just an engineer, recovered with sequelae, 520 out of 42,000. Now what that means is you took the shot and you're recovering from it, but you have long-term chronic issues related to the shot. That's what that means. So 520. Not recovered at the time of the report, 11,361 out of 42,000. Fatal, 1,223. Unknown, 9,400. So the government said that we have a rigorous process, scientific review. We have the best minds available. And this was the crap data that they used. And they still rolled this thing out and gave it to you and your babies and your pregnant wives and your grandma and your grandpa. I will. Yeah. I will take a breath and a drink of water.
No, that's right. Exactly. I was just looking at a couple of the comments in the chat, and I'm digressing slightly, but they're asking about the World Economic Forum. Are you up to speed on that at all? Or have you got any thoughts regarding the World Economic Forum? Have you followed them? Or...
Yeah, you know what? I have I have a blog post coming out very shortly about that. Anybody who's following us will see that we're not, we're not political, except that we expect that if we hire you to represent us, that you do that job. And we've been chasing a number of MPs and government officials about various statements or lack of statements that they've been making. And one particular MP, we had a really interesting meeting with just before Christmas, and that topic came up. And now I don't want to ruin the surprise when my post comes out, but you know what? I would evaluate the statements that were told to us, and it wasn't just, I wasn't in the room. I was actually in Calgary with the Canadians for Truth, Freedom, and Justice group that day, and 4 or 5 other people were there. And I believe that the answers on the WEF that we got from our MP were, in his estimation, honest. But that shocks me as well, because according to this MP, the WEF is no different than the Lions Club. That's a quote. Let that sink in a little bit. That's what your MPs think, or at least this one does. And we'll provide details on that. The WEF, to me, it's a scary organization. Anytime any one single organization has infiltrated so deeply into governments all around the world, not just in Canada, not just in the federal government, provincial government, that raises concerns. It has to. If you listen to some of this, if you listen to some of the speeches that were made in their conventions and by their leaders, those are really scary. Those are for those of you who might not have some historical perspective on that, because you don't have the same color hair that I've got or a beard. There's a book. It's an old one, but it's worth it reading, at least the one chapter. It's called "The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich." And chapter 11, I believe it's chapter 11, is entitled "Life in the Third Reich." And what it talks about in that chapter is what the Nazis did to the schools, what they did to the churches, how they infiltrated churches, schools, government agencies. It's actually chilling if you read it in the context of what's going on today. And again, everybody's Nazi this and Nazi that and fascist this and racist that and all that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's chilling to read that chapter in that book. And again, it's titled "Life in the Third Reich," and it's actually up to 1938, before the war actually broke out.
Yeah, there's a lot of information about the 30s in Germany. I know my grandfather was intimately involved in journalism back then, and he wrote a lot of articles about Hitler. And he talked about how Hitler was influencing the general population through the radio, and he controlled the media. And of course, the people wanted to believe him. They believed him. He got voted in, and the rest is history. It's really pretty amazing what he was able to accomplish.
But
when he controlled everything.
It wasn't just that, and this part is really chilling to me, because I have these conversations probably on a weekly basis with people. I'll talk to somebody about what's going on, and they said, "Well, Ken, I won't do anything until they're walking down my driveway." Your neighbor's gone, your mother's gone, your grandfather's in jail, your kids are masked, and you're going to wait until they're banging on your door. If you wait that long, there's not going to be nobody there to back you up. And that's what happened in Germany in the 30s. Yeah, it's not coming here. It's not going to get us. It's not going to affect us. It's an amazing phenomenon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm just going to go back a bit to the start of the webinar here, and I asked you about, what tweaked your interest in this whole COVID-19 thing. For me, it was, I had a friend of mine who was a doctor in Southern California, and he, along with two other doctors, opened up 12 clinics, and they were dealing with 5,000 patients every month. And they started using the PCR test to detect COVID, which they were told they had to do. And after about 1 month, they realized that their test results were about 10% accurate at best.
Yep.
And they brought it to the media, and they were saying, yeah, we're just creating all this extra fear in society because now all of a sudden everybody that comes in has COVID, or practically everybody, but they actually don't. And so they brought that to the media, and of course they were basically told to shut up, otherwise all the clinics would be shut down.
Yeah.
And then I listened to Anthony Fauci on 60 Minutes Live, and he was talking about masks. And I don't know if you saw that one, but
I
he
saw a
said,
few of them.
yeah, and he was actually right on this one, because he said the only masks that work for viruses are N95. And he said, if you wear a surgical mask, well, you're deceiving yourself because they don't work. But what do we wear? Everybody wears surgical masks.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
whole world's wearing these surgical masks that really don't work.
Yeah.
We're deceiving ourselves, and
Yeah.
it's really amazing. Anyway, I'm so glad that you're actually getting all these facts together, and you've done all this critical thinking, and hopefully through your resources, people are going to start to see more of what really happened, and
Yeah.
start thinking about it more, and talking to the politicians and saying, hey, listen, this is all wrong, and you got to make some changes here.
Yeah, it doesn't, just so folks know it doesn't take a lot, it really doesn't take a lot to start influencing this. And this group that I'm a part of is a grassroots group. We rely on, you downloading the report and you sending it to your senator, and people have said, or to your MP or to your MLA, and people said to me, well, but Ken, someone's already sent it to them. Send it again. They'll ignore it if they get one. They'll ignore it if they get two. But they won't ignore it when they've got 500 of them. So snow it on them, send it to them, email it to them, courier it to them. It all depends on you guys. I've made it as easy as I possibly can, with cards and downloads and information. So, but if we've turned a corner on this. There's been so many people fighting this, and we've been at this for about a year fighting it in mass, but they planned this for decades. And the progress that we've made, people, has been incredible. You can't drop the baton now. We really got to push this now. The information's coming out. Twitter files are coming out and just showing the depth of corruption. And believe me, if the FBI was doing that in the United States, CSIS and RCMP were doing it here. Trust me.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I was just going to maybe open up for some questions from our audience. I haven't seen any yet. So if I come across one, I'll pass it on to you.
Well, maybe we want to, just because you mentioned it, just mention a little bit more about the PCR test. The fellow that invented that, who's passed away now, by the way,
Harry Mullis.
Yeah, he actually came out and testified that it was not intended to do this. The PCR test was not intended to be a diagnostic tool. It was essentially, it was nicknamed a cellular photocopier, and it was intended for police forensic work. So if police officers were doing DNA evidence gathering on a crime scene, and there was just the smallest amount of DNA that they couldn't test, they'd put it in a PCR mechanism, and they'd replicate it over and over again. Each cycle replicates it, so they go 40, 50 replications, and they'd have enough material to test. That's what it's for. It's not for diagnosis of a disease.
I know, and with the body having trillions of viruses in them at any one time, that PCR test can detect any one of those by ramping up the cycles, just like you said. And all of a sudden, you could have whatever disease that they wanted to focus in on.
You wait, they're going to do that too. I noticed down in the States this morning, there's been a number, I think it's 13 states, somebody could correct me on this, 11 or 13 states that are now reintroducing COVID masking, lockdowns, etc.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what's happened.
Yeah. It's, but again, I did a blog post on this too. We had municipal elections a little while ago in Manitoba, and it was criminal what happened. And I mean by the citizens, in my riding, in my municipality, there were 6 councillors and 1 mayor. The mayor and 3 councillors got in by acclamation. What that means is Nobody ran against them. They just got in. And out of the three
Right.
counselors that the other three counselors, they had competitors against them. There was 3 or 4 days before the election, there was a town hall debate. Not a single one of those sitting counselors showed up, and yet they all got elected. So, is it the criminals' fault?
Really, yeah. Yeah. Who are the criminals?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I have to tell you something. My wife and I, we both belong to Toastmasters, and we had an English-speaking group of Chinese from the city of Xi'an, China. It's a city of about 9 million people. And they joined our Toastmasters meeting one night. And they were all great, great English speakers. In fact, it was rather humbling at times because some of them spoke better English than some of our club members. But anyway, we were talking to them about what they were going through with their lockdowns. And it was brutal. I mean,
Yeah.
they were stuck in their apartments. The kids couldn't go to school. The doors were taped shut from the outside to make sure they didn't cheat. They couldn't go outside. The pets had to stay inside. They did that for months. And if you can believe, the communities tested everybody with, they called it a nucleic acid test, which is a PCR test. They
Yep.
tested them every day in the community. Every person got tested. And if one person even became asymptomatic, they got locked down again. They were locked down for 6 months, couldn't go out.
Yeah.
And that's
And,
what they went through.
and now they have the highest infection rates in the world because, of course,
Yeah.
locking people up and massing them for a year and a half made it so that you're now susceptible to everything. Not to mention all the data that's coming out now that says the more shots you got, the more susceptible you are to getting COVID. I mean, that's incredible. And that's what the numbers are coming out saying right now. I saw a report just the other day. As a matter of fact, I published on our blog post. There's a lot of really good information on our blog post, by the way. So you want to go to that. But
Yeah.
I published a post in the NIH website of a neurologist just tearing apart the whole narrative, and and yet
I
they're
know.
still doing it.
Yeah, it's just unreal. What else can you say? It's just unreal. Yeah, it's I just hope that through all this hard work you're doing and the information that you're putting out there, that more and more people get to see it. And I would encourage everybody that's listening to this webinar, and they can go to your website, which is www.thetruefactsc19.com. As you said, all this information is there, and there's a tremendous amount of it, and interviews and documents to go through. And I would really encourage everybody to go there because it's highly informative. And as you said, you can pass it on quite easily. I'd encourage everybody to pass it on to all their members of Parliament, the Senate, even the Chief Justices across Canada.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody gets that, and your
Yeah.
friends and neighbors, and if you're brave enough, you can maybe pass it on to the people that might think you're a little bit weird. But anyway, they should know about it too.
Well, I've had a lot of those. I mean, you know what? I passed this on to a engineer friend of mine when it first came out. And are you going to read it? Oh, yeah, I knew he never read it. And then just a
No.
few months ago, I was in his office just having a visit, and he looked at me and he went quiet and he said, Ken, I read your report. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you told me you read it months ago. Anyway, he said, I read your report, and you know what? I agree with every single word in it. And I kind of went, woohoo.
Oh yeah, well that's great. That's nice to get that feedback. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
know, yeah. And before I go on back with you again, Ken, I just want to mention to everybody here that Alberta Prosperity Projects, we're a nonprofit organization, and we basically exist because of memberships and donations. So please, if you're not a member, join up, and you'll be able to take part in all these different webinars and all the facts that we have online listed. And we need to spread the word out to as many people in Canada as much as possible to make sure that this kind of stuff stops and never happens again.
Yeah. And the only way we're going to do that is by the citizens mobilizing. And again, don't misunderstand. You don't have to go and get a pitchfork and go to the legislature. That's not what we're saying. all you got to do is take a copy of that report or put 10 of those business cards in your pocket and hand them out. You don't even have to say anything. Drop them in the mailbox, put them on the bulletin board. Drop one off at the school. Drop one off at your doctor's. My doctor and I had tremendous discussions about this before he retired.
Oh, I know. Even here, my own GP, who is sympathetic to my beliefs about COVID, he was telling me in his community that a lot of doctors, if you didn't get vaccinated, the doctors wouldn't treat you. They wouldn't let
Yep.
you in the office even.
Yeah.
And to me, that really goes against the whole Hippocratic Oath. I
it's worse
found
than
that
that.
amazing to hear that.
Yeah. Than that. They have a fiduciary duty to the patients. We give them a special place in our society. We as taxpayers paid for the better part of their education. We give them a high place and a high place of respect in our society, and we trust that they'll be doing best that they can for the patients. And so they have a fiduciary duty. It's not up to them just to decide, well, I'm not going to treat you because you're not wearing a mask. Have you read any of the reports? Have you read any of the data? That's your responsibility to do that. There's no excuse in my mind. Part of the title of this session, and it's, we could go all night, and I know we can't, but was about crime and punishment. And, it's not just the big people at the top that initiated this that have to go through the justice system. It's all of them. If you're a pharmacist sticking needles in the arms of people, you should face investigation, whatever that means in the future. If you're a school board that was putting masks on little kids and hindering their development, and there was no science behind it, as we know there wasn't, then there's something that has to happen there too. And it has to go, justice, true justice is not necessarily punishment. It's not retribution. It's justice. And that has to go across. It has to go from top to bottom.
That's right, exactly. And, people just have to look at the facts. And the facts are all there. And once they look at those facts, they'll realize what's actually happened.
Yeah.
And that is so important. And once again, I'd like to thank you so very much for coming over to Alberta, even though it's on the internet. It's like you're here actually. And thank you very much for this webinar. You had a great presentation and a lot of tremendous information for everybody. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that have been enlightened rather about with the information. And once again, everybody, please go to the Ken site there at the truefactsc19.com, because he's got a lot of stuff on that site, and I think you'll be quite impressed. So once again, thanks very much for joining us at Alberta Prosperity Project. It was truly a pleasure.
Well, it was a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity. And just before we go, we were talking earlier, and we have another group that will be coming out. It's in its baby stages right now, but if you're interested, it's called rockingrandmasunited.com. That's rockin, ROCKIN, grandmasunited.com. We just put up a infant website, and we're developing it, but going to be some really interesting stuff coming out there in the next couple of weeks, and hope that everybody can stop by and subscribe. And again, it's free, no membership charges or anything, and to be a really good support mechanism for people.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I forgot to say Happy New Year.
Well, we're so rare to go at the beginning of the year to get the. But absolutely.
Yeah. Well, before we get cut off here, I have to just give you one little bit of information here. In Panama, where I am currently right now, doing this webinar, New Year's Eve, everybody has fireworks. I mean, everybody. You go down the streets and all the homes are shooting off fireworks. And many of the homes out front of the houses have effigies, and they're life-size dolls, and they have little things on them and it's like get rid of this person, or get rid of that person, or get rid of this idea, or I don't like this person. Well, you won't believe it, but there's effigies of Anthony Fauci being displayed here in Panama, which I couldn't believe. So the word gets around. It doesn't matter where you
Well,
are.
it's too bad it takes so long sometimes. There's an old expression that a lie makes it on the roll twice before the truth gets out of bed in the morning. But it's I'm so happy the truth is now starting to get out. And although we're a few years into this, it's unstoppable force. The truth is unstoppable.
That's right. I agree 100%. That's right. Exactly. Thank you very
So
much.
thanks a lot. Good night.
Okay, good night.